6:04 in the evening, an ordinary Wednesday near San Felipe in northern Venezuela. People are cooking dinner, driving home, putting their kids to bed. Then the ground doesn't shake so much as lurch, a magnitude 7.2 earthquake tearing through the state of Yaracuy. And just as the screaming starts, before anyone can even reach a doorway, it happens again. 39 seconds later, the earth ruptures a second time, and this one is bigger, a magnitude 7.5. This was June 24th, 2026. Two great earthquakes, back to back, in less than the time it takes to read this sentence out loud. It was the most violent shaking Venezuela has felt in more than a century, since the year 1900. The shaking was so powerful it rolled outward for hundreds of miles. People felt it in Bogota, over in neighboring Colombia. It reached all the way into Brazil's Amazon, more than 1,000 miles away. And for a few terrifying minutes, a tsunami threat went out across the Caribbean, from Puerto Rico down to the islands just off Venezuela's own coast. And here's the first thing you have to understand. Two enormous quakes in under a minute is not simply bad luck striking twice in the same spot. Scientists don't treat it as two unrelated disasters at all. They treat it as a single connected event, and it has its own name, which leaves a question sitting at the very center of this catastrophe. Why would the same small corner of one country rip itself open twice in just 39 seconds? By the time the second wave of shaking stopped, Venezuela was already counting its dead. At least 188 people killed, more than 1,500 injured, hundreds more trapped beneath slabs of fallen concrete, with the toll still climbing by the hour as rescuers reach the worst-hit neighborhoods. The coastal state of La Guaira took the heaviest blow and was declared a disaster zone. That is where you find Simon Bolivar International Airport, the country's main gateway to the world, and one of its largest seaports, both crippled at the exact moment the country needed them most. Out on the coast, that tsunami warning was lifted within the hour. But on land, the destruction only kept growing. Hundreds of people were still unaccounted for under the rubble, and nearly 3,000 families watched their homes damaged or destroyed in a single evening. In Caracas and the cities around it, entire buildings pancaked into the street. Search teams flew in from the United States and Colombia, rescue dogs picking carefully through the dust, while ordinary families clawed at the rubble with their bare hands, straining to hear anyone still alive underneath. But look closely at the map and something doesn't add up. The earthquakes were centered out in Yaracuy, well to the west. So why did the shaking reach all the way into the capital and bring down buildings so far from where the ground actually broke? Here's how almost every big earthquake you've ever heard of actually works. One large rupture, the main shock, releases most of the stored energy. Then come the aftershocks, a fading series of smaller jolts, each one weaker than the last, sometimes rumbling on for weeks. That is the normal pattern. And it is emphatically not what happened in Venezuela. Venezuela was struck by what seismologists call a doublet. Not a single big quake and its little echoes, but two main earthquakes of similar, enormous size. The 7.2 and the 7.5 were both heavyweight ruptures, only a few kilometers apart, causally linked yet seismologically distinct events. And if that sounds familiar, it should. Back in 2023, Turkey was hit by a similar pairing, two giant earthquakes on the same day that together killed tens of thousands of people. Doublets are uncommon, but when one strikes a crowded region, it ranks among the most destructive natural events on Earth. And this is the part to hold on to, because the worst of it is still coming. A true doublet is genuinely rare, and it is exactly the thing that turns a severe earthquake into a national catastrophe. In a few minutes, you will see precisely how those 39 seconds multiplied the destruction. But if both shocks were full main shocks and not aftershocks, that forces the real question. What made the ground fire a second time, almost instantly, and could it fire like that again? To understand the second quake, you first have to understand what a fault actually is. Deep underground, two enormous blocks of rock are locked together, straining to slide past each other but held fast by friction. Stress builds for decades, even centuries. An earthquake is the instant that stress finally overpowers the friction, and the rock lurches free. Now watch what the first rupture did. When the 7.2 let go, it didn't just release its own energy, it physically shoved the surrounding crust, redistributing that stress onto the neighboring fault segment. Geologists call this static stress transfer, and it can push a nearby fault that was already near its limit right over the edge. And there is a second mechanism stacked right on top of it. The seismic waves racing outward from the first quake don't only shake buildings, they shake other faults. A fault that is already loaded and primed can be jolted into failure by that passing wave of energy alone. And what is truly remarkable here is the speed. Most linked earthquakes are hours or even days apart. This time it was 39 seconds, because the two faults sat right next to each other, so that wave of stress arrived almost instantly. The second fault was already so close to breaking that the smallest extra push was enough to finish it. Put those forces together, and the doublet finally makes terrible sense. The 7.2 did not stand alone. It loaded the gun and pulled the trigger on the 7.5, handing the second fault the exact final push it needed, just 39 seconds later. So why is this fault sitting here, loaded and waiting, in the first place? Northern Venezuela rides directly on the seam between two of the planet's great tectonic plates. The Caribbean plate is grinding eastward, scraping past the South American plate at roughly 2 centimeters every year, about as fast as your fingernails grow. That relentless grinding built a monster, the Bocono, San Sebastian, and El Pilar fault system, a chain of fractures running some 1,300 kilometers across the top of the country. These are strike-slip faults, where the two sides slide horizontally past one another, the very same kind of fault as California's San Andreas. Zoom in closer, and the two ruptures sat trapped inside a tense triangle of faults, boxed in to the south, the north, and the west. When they finally tore, the break ripped along a zone roughly 150 kilometers long, unzipping the crust in a matter of seconds. And here is why that should stop you cold. This is not some quiet, sleeping fault. It is the same fault family that has devastated Venezuela before, quietly storing up centuries of strain between disasters. And what you are about to see is what happens when it finally lets go right next to a city. There was one more factor that made June 24th so brutal. The rupture was shallow, only about 10 kilometers beneath the surface. The closer a quake breaks to the ground you are standing on, the less its energy fades before it reaches you. And this one hit at almost full strength. Now we can finally answer why cities far from the epicenter still came down. It starts with the kind of fault this was. Strike-slip ruptures throw their energy sideways, in violent horizontal jolts, and horizontal force happens to be exactly what a building is worst at surviving. Then there is what that energy slammed into. A large share of Venezuela's older housing is unreinforced masonry, brick and block walls with no steel skeleton holding them together. Much of it built before the country modernized its earthquake building codes back in the 1970s. That is why the damage didn't stay out near Yumare. The shaking rolled into Valencia, into Maracay, and into Caracas itself, cities packed with exactly this kind of vulnerable construction, standing dozens of kilometers from where the faults had actually broken. So here is the full answer. Take shaking that arrives shallow and at almost full strength, multiply it by 2 great ruptures instead of 1, and send all of that into brittle pre-code buildings. The result is collapse reaching dozens of kilometers from where the ground actually broke. And this is the doublet's final cruelty. The first quake cracked walls and buckled columns but left them standing. Then, 39 seconds later, the second quake hit those already wounded buildings, and the ones that might just have survived a single earthquake simply could not survive too. If all of this feels like history repeating itself, that is because it is. On March 26, 1812, this very same fault system tore Caracas apart and killed somewhere between 15 and 26,000 people. It struck on Holy Thursday, while the churches were full, a cruel accident of timing that made it even deadlier. And then it happened again. A magnitude 7.7 quake in the year 1900. Another one near Caracas in 1967. The pattern is unmistakable because the plates never stop moving, which means the strain always eventually comes back. So, is the danger over? Not yet, and not for a while. Strong aftershocks are essentially guaranteed for weeks, threatening buildings that are already pushed to the brink. And on the longer clock, this boundary will rupture again somewhere, someday, because that is simply what it does. And it has already started. More than 20 aftershocks have rattled the region, 6 of them felt in Caracas within the first 2 hours alone. Each one is a fresh threat to buildings that are barely standing, which is why engineers are now racing to tag the structures that are no longer safe to enter. A rare doublet, a shallow fault, and old brittle buildings. 3 forces that, together, turn just 39 seconds into one of the worst disasters in Venezuela's modern history. But behind every number on that list is a person, a family, a home. So keep them in your thoughts tonight. And if this helped the science finally make sense, share it so others understand too.